So we start. Good evening to all of you and a warm welcome to this event at the 23rd International Literature Festival here in Berlin and from wherever you may join us via live stream. Thanks for being here. My name is Maria-Christina Piwowarski, and it's a great pleasure and joy and most of all excitement for me to be here with you tonight, talking to the wonderful Doireann Ní Ghríofa about her book, A Ghost in the Throat. Doireann Ní Ghríofa is an Irish author born in 1981. She is famous for her poems and essays and rewarded with fellowships and prizes for her work. In 2020, A Ghost in the Throat was published at Tramp Press in Dublin and was, and still is, an amazing success. It was Irish Book of the Year. It was shortlisted and rewarded with prizes like the James Tate Black Memory Prize. It received fellowships in the US and in Europe, and it is praised in countless enthusiastic reviews. Sorry, I'm really excited today. Countless enthusiastic reviews. And the story goes on. A Ghost in the Throat has been translated already into 18 languages. The German version by Cornelius Reiber and Jens Friebe was published at BTB Verlag this spring, Ein Geist in der Kehle. The book tells us the story of a woman being soaked with love and with care work for her very small children, being soaked with everyday tasks and the most incredibly emotions of sorrow and bliss. And during that very special time in her life, during that sleepless, busy, powerful and fragile time in her life, she connects to the life of another woman, also a mother, a lover, and a poet who lived centuries ago, Eibhlín Daphne Chonaills. So it's a book about the connection between times and lives. It's a book about love and obsession and motherhood and all the feelings in between. It's a book about remarkable women. And it's written in the most unique, fascinating, intense and impressive way. I never read such a book before. And still, month after I did it, it still works in me and fills me with marvel and gratitude. And it kind of seems to, I feel, accompanied with its characters and its voice. So that's what I love most about literature. So give a warm welcome to the author of such masterpiece of art and literature, Doireann Ní Ghríofa. And with us on stage tonight, and I'm very, very happy, reading from the astonishing German translation by Cornelius Reiber and Jens Friebe, is the artist and actress Benita Bailey. Hello, Benita. It's so good to have you here tonight. So I still have to talk about a schedule a few more seconds, and then I'm finishing my monologue. I'm sorry for this. So after my first question, Doireann will begin a short reading in English from the book, and Benita will take over reading in German from the very beginning of Ein Geist in der Kehle. And then we will talk about poetry and motherhood, about the lives of remarkable women and their oblivion in a history that is mainly written by male authors. Later, Benita will read a second time, and at the end, you, dear audience, will have the chance to ask the questions that may not come to my excited mind, because I'm so happy to have Doireann so close to me. Doireann, and this is maybe important because we have to keep an eye on the clock, Doireann will be giving another great talk directly afterwards, so we can't go over time, but you won't want to miss the discussion with her and Liana Fink and Saskia Vogel about Frauen als Genies und Kunstmonster directly hereafter. And then I'm very delighted, we are all very delighted to have so wonderful support from the Irish Embassy. And I want to warm welcome the Deputy Ambassador John Lynham. John Lynham, there he is. And Kieran Walsh and Jamie Gartland, because at 9 p.m., so after Doireann's next talk, the embassy is inviting us all and you all to a very nice reception directly here in the Haus der Berliner Festspiele at the Bornemann Bar. So we will have drinks and talks and celebrate Irish literature. Thank you so much, Mr. Lynham, to make that possible. And now we focus completely on Doireann and her Ghost in the Throat. So, dear Doireann, you had really busy days talking about your book in Frankfurt and Hamburg already. And how has it been traveling with your book so far, talking to readers in Germany and meeting new admirers of you and no doubt Eibhlín Dubh?
Thank you, first of all, Maria, and it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you this evening in Berlin, and thank you all so much for coming along. It's been fascinating, really fascinating to visit Germany. It's been such a pleasure, and to meet the readers is absolutely wonderful as well, and to hear their response. It's just blown me away, honestly. It's just blown me away. And I think actually I find it much, I'm quite shy as a person, so I always find it much easier to talk about the Eibhlín Dubh parts of the book than about the other parts of the book, because my readers and I generally, once they've read this book, share a passion for Eibhlín Dubh Ní Chonaills, so we always have something in common.
Yes, I understand. The people who are in the audience, did they know Eibhlín Dubh before, or are a lot of them who know her thanks for your book now?
My impression is the latter for the most part. In Ireland it's different, because a lot of people would have encountered the beautiful poem composed by Eibhlín Dubh Ní Chonaills, which we call Queen Airt the Lyra. A lot of people in Ireland might have encountered it in school. I suppose especially kind of older people, it's not taught so much at the moment. But when I meet readers here, they've encountered it through this book, and that is so deeply moving to me, because every reader who comes to this book here in this beautiful edition and so beautifully translated, for which I'm very grateful, what they're encountering is Eibhlín Dubh's voice, and at the back of the book, the entire poem that she composed that drew me in so much is published in the original Irish language version. As she spoke it, as she composed it herself, her own words. And I just find that extraordinary, that every reader who picks up this book here in Germany is meeting the voice, the pure, beautiful voice of Eibhlín Dubh Ní Chonaills, speaking in her original Irish. It's really not something I would have anticipated when I was writing the book, and it's been a joy.
So I think it's a good idea to start now and to hear what we will talk about. So Doireann will read from the beginning of the English version, and then Benita will take over and read from the translation by Cornelius Reiber and Jens Friebe, Ein Geist in der Kehle.
It starts with a little quote from the poem, which is Hug mo húil aragoit, hug mo chrí tanavgoit. How my eye took a shine to you, how my heart took delight in you. This is a female text. This is a female text composed while folding someone else's clothes. My mind holds it close and it grows, tender and slow, while my hands perform innumerable chores. This is a female text, born of guilt and desire, stitched to a soundtrack of cartoon nursery rhymes. This is a female text, and it's a tiny miracle that it even exists as it does in this moment, lifted to another consciousness by the ordinary wonder of type. Ordinary, too, the ricochet of thought that swoops now from my body to yours. This is a female text, written in the 21st century. How late it is, how much has changed, how little. This is a female text which is also a Caoineadh, a dirge and a drudge song, an anthem of praise, a chant and a keen, a lament and an echo, a chorus and a hymn. Join in.
2012. Mein Morgen verläuft jeden Tag weitgehend gleich. Ich küsse meinen Mann und fühle dabei einen Stich. Egal wie oft wir uns morgens so verabschieden, vermisse ich ihn bereits, wenn er das Haus verlässt. Noch während man sein Motorrad in die Ferne davondonnern hört, beginne ich rasch meinen Tag. Erst füttere ich unsere Söhne, dann räume ich die Spülmaschine ein, hebe Spielzeug vom Boden auf, wische Flecken weg, schaue auf die Uhr, bringe unseren Ältesten zur Schule, gehe wieder nach Hause mit dem Kleinen und dem Baby, seufze und schlafe, lache und küsse, sinke aufs Sofa, um den Jüngsten zu stillen, schaue wieder auf die Uhr, lese die Raupe Nimmersatt ein paar Mal nacheinander vor, versuche im Bad über dem Waschbecken Babyspeichel auszuwaschen, scheitere, baue einen Turm aus Klötzen zum Umstoßen, versuche den Boden zu wischen, gebe auf, als das Baby schreit, küsse die Knie des Kleinen, der auf dem halb gewischten Boden ausgerutscht ist, schaue wieder auf die Uhr, wische verschütteten Saft auf, setze den Kleinen an einen Tisch vor ein Puzzle und trage den Kleinsten nach oben ins Bett. Das Baby schläft in einer Wiege aus dritter Hand, zusammengehalten mit schwarzem Klebeband, und die Wände des Schlafzimmers unserer Mietwohnung schmücken keine pastellfarbenen Wandgemälde, sondern Gebilde aus schwarzem Schimmel. Mir fällt immer kein Schlaflied ein, also greife ich auf die Lieder von Mixtapes aus meiner Jugend zurück. Ich habe Karma Police so oft zurückgespult, dass ich schon oft befürchtete, dass das braune Band reißen könnte. Aber jedes Mal, wenn ich Play drückte, spielte das Gerät das Lied wieder ab. Jetzt, in meiner Erschöpfung, kehre ich zu dieser Melodie zurück und summe sie leise, während das Baby glucksend von meiner Brust trinkt. Sobald sich sein Kiefer entspannt und sich seine Augen nach hinten verdrehen, schleiche ich mich davon. Erneut fasziniert vom Gedanken, wie oft einzelne Augenblicke meines Tages von unzähligen anderen Frauen in unzähligen anderen Wohnungen durchlebt werden, verbunden mit mir im Text unserer Tage. Ich frage mich, ob sie ihre Schufterei genauso lieben wie ich, ob sie die gleiche Freude daran haben, langsam Listen wie meine abzuarbeiten, auf der so einfache Dinge stehen wie zur Schule bringen, wischen, oben Staubsaugen, Milch abpumpen, Mülleimer, Geschirrspüler, Wäsche, Klo putzen, Milch, Spinat, Huhn, Porridge, von Schule abholen, Bank plus Spielplatz, Abendessen, Baden, ins Bett bringen. Ich trage meine Liste so nah bei mir wie mein Handy und es verschafft mir eine Befriedigung, wenn ich wieder einen Punkt von der Liste streichen kann. Diese Art Auslöschung gefällt mir. Doch egal, wie viel meiner Energie in die Erledigung der Pflichten fließt, löst sich die Ordnung jedes Zimmers hinter mir direkt wieder auf, als legte eine Schattenhand schon die noch ungeschriebene Liste für die nächsten Tage an. Wieder aufräumen, wieder Staubsaugen, wieder abstauben, wieder wischen, fegen und wienern. Wenn mein Mann zu Hause ist, teilen wir die Aufgaben im Haushalt auf. Aber wenn ich allein bin, arbeite ich alleine. Ich sage es ihm nicht, aber mir ist es lieber so. Ich habe gerne die Kontrolle. Trotz aller Aufgaben auf meiner Liste und trotz meiner Hingabe an ihre Erledigungen sieht das Haus so munter durcheinander aus wie jedes andere Haus mit kleinen Kindern, nicht sauberer, nicht schmutziger. Heute Morgen habe ich bislang erst zur Schule bringen von der Liste gestrichen. Was auch einschließt, dass ich die Kinder wecke, anziehe, wasche und ihnen Essen mache, den Frühstückstisch abräume, die Jacken, Mützen und Schuhe suche, Zähne putze, mehrfach das Wort Schuhe rufe, eine Brotdose fülle, eine Schultasche kontrolliere, erneut Schuhe rufe und dann endlich zur Schule und zurücklaufe. Seit ich wieder zu Hause bin, habe ich den Geschirrspüler bislang erst halb eingeräumt, meinen Sohn halb beim Puzzeln geholfen und halb den Boden gewischt. Nichts, was ich von meiner Liste streichen könnte. Ich klammere mich an meine Liste, da sie es ist, die mich an der Hand durch meine Tage führt und die Stunden in einer Abfolge kleiner, bewältigbarer Aufgaben unterteilt. Nach dem Abarbeiten einer guten Liste, wenn ich wieder in den Armen meines schlafenden Mannes liege, ist ihr Text zu einer Reihe von Kritzeleien geworden. Eine Auslöschung, auf die ich mit Freude und Genugtuung schaue, da das schrittweise Ausstreichen dieses handgeschriebenen Dokuments mir das Gefühl gibt, dass ich den Tag über Wertvolles geleistet habe. Die Liste ist meine Landkarte und mein Kompass zugleich. Ich merke, wie ich in Verzug gerate. Als überfliege ich den Text der heutigen Aufgaben, um mir Überblick zu verschaffen, stelle dann den Geschirrspüler an und ziehe einen Strich durch das Wort. Ich lächle, als ich den Kleinen helfe, das fehlende Puzzleteil zu finden, klatsche, als es vollständig ist, und hole schließlich die Fernbedienung. Ich kuschle nicht mit ihm, während er die Oktonauten schaut. Ich setze mich nicht mit ihm aufs Sofa und schließe dort nicht für 10 Minuten meine müden Augen. Stattdessen eile ich in die Küche, wische den Boden fertig, leere die Mülleimer und streiche diese Aufgaben dann schwungvoll von der Liste. Über der Spüle schrubbe ich meine Hände, Nägel und Handgelenke und dann noch einmal. Ich nehme Teile von Trichtern und Filtern aus dem Dampfsterilisator, um die Milchpumpe zusammenzusetzen. Solche Geräte sind nicht billig und da ich keiner bezahlten Arbeit mehr nachgehe, habe ich sie gebraucht gekauft. Die Anzeige wirkte auf meinem Bildschirm fast so anrührend wie die Geschichte mit den Babyschuhen, die meist Ernest Hemingway zugeschrieben wird. Gekauft für 209 €, zu verkaufen für 45 € VB. Einmal benutzt. Seit Monaten vollführen diese Maschine und ich jeden Morgen das gleiche kleine Ritual, um Milch für die Babys von Fremden abzupumpen. Ich öffne meinen BH und schiebe meine Brust in den Trichter. Es ist immer die rechte Brust, da meine linke Brust eine faule Sau ist. Einen Monat nach der Geburt hat sie die Produktion weitgehend eingestellt, sodass sowohl das Baby als auch die Maschine ausschließlich von der rechten Brust versorgt werden müssen. Ich drücke den Schalter, zucke zusammen, wenn sie unangenehm an meiner Brustwarze ruckelt, setze mich richtig hin und drehe dann am Regler für die Intensität, mit der die Maschine am Fleisch zieht. Zunächst sind die Züge des Mechanismus schnell getaktet und fest und ahmen das schnelle Saugen des Babys nach, bis sie glaubt, dass die Milch zu fließen begonnen haben muss. Wenig später pendelt sich die Pumpe auf einen gleichmäßigen Rhythmus ein. Längeres Ziehen, Loslassen, Wiederziehen. Das Gefühl an der Brustwarze ist wie eine Reihe kleiner Stromstöße oder ein seltsam stechelndes Kribbeln. Im Gegensatz zum Stillen des Babys brennt dieser Vorgang immer. Er ist nie angenehm, aber der Schmerz ist erträglich. Schließlich setzt die Milch, wie von der Maschine gefordert, in Bewegung, von irgendwo unter meinen Achselhöhlen. Ein Tropfen fällt von der Brustwarze herab und wird direkt in die Maschine gesaugt. Dann noch einer und noch einer, bis sich eine kleine Pfütze am Boden der Flasche bildet. Ich wende meinen Blick ab. Wenn ich morgens besonders müde bin, träume ich dabei manchmal eine Weile vor mich hin und vertiefe mich für 10 Minuten in ein Buch aus der Bibliothek. Aber heute nehme ich, wie an so vielen anderen Tagen, meine zerlesene Fotokopie von Caoineadh zur Hand und heiße die Stimme einer anderen Frau willkommen, eine Weile in meiner Kehle zu spuken. So fülle ich die einzige kleine Stille meines Tages, indem ich die Lautstärke ihrer Stimme aufdrehe zur Begleitung des Keuchens und Surrens der Pumpe, bis ich nur noch dieses Geräusch höre. Auf dem Rand der Seiten tritt mein Bleistift ins Gespräch mit vielen früheren Versionen meiner selbst. Ein sich wandelndes Gedankenprotokoll, in dem jedes Fragezeichen nach dem Leben der Dichterin fragt, die das Caoineadh verfasst hat, aber nie mein eigenes hinterfragt. Einige Minuten später schrecke ich auf und sehe, dass sich die Pumpe mit blasser, warmer Flüssigkeit gefüllt hat.
So first of all, dear Doireann, let's talk about how you found your form for the book. It's permeable, fluent artwork, including pieces of autofiction and memoir and research, of course. It's literature above all else. So how did that longer prose form came to you after working on 5, now 6 books of poetry, and you also wrote about Eibhlín Dubh before in poems?
Yeah, you know, it was an exciting book to write, and I felt as I was beginning to try and like we'd say in our Hiberno English, to put words on it, to articulate this story, what I found was that it required lots of different genres, that was the kind of form it was demanding. And I think choosing a little of this and a little of that has actually enriched the book and made it more vivid in some way. That's something that readers seem to have really responded to, that kind of radical experimentation.
And you cannot tame it in any genre. It's a very, very own piece of art. The first sentence is repeated several times throughout the whole book. This is a female text. So what does that mean?
It's funny, we were talking about this last night in Hamburg as well. It's when that phrase first occurred to me, it happened very much as it does in the book. I had gone to Kehle, where Airt Eibhlín Dubh's husband is buried, with my little daughter, and as we were driving away, this phrase started to go round and round my head like a snatch of a pop song or something, and it kept repeating. And when I got home, I was searching for a pen and paper to write it down, because I felt that it held a certain importance. And when I had written it on a piece of paper, I was looking at it and saying, it seems so simple, a phrase, this is a female text, but the more you think about that, the more difficult it is. What is a female text? I found myself thinking, how could one define that? And actually, I think that that's a question that I still haven't answered for myself. I think in some ways this book was an effort with the self that I was as I was writing this book to answer that question in many different ways, from the very distinct perspective that's involved in it, which is just one experience of that. And as I was writing the book and in the years since, what has opened up to me very much is the sense that of just how much broader and more multiple and richer many lives, many female texts, if we can think of them that way, really are. I mean, those of us who live in female bodies, those of us who choose to live in female bodies, there's something about that that's very distinct to each individual. And I think that it's a question that probably everyone that lives like that as we do would answer in their own particular way. So I feel that I attempted to suggest what a female text is for one person within this book, but I'm so conscious of how it's just one example of that. And I still really haven't answered the question even for myself.
And we are so grateful that you put this question in our minds and we start to think about what it may be. And it's very, very good. So we talked about the Caoineadh already a lot, and it accompanied you a long time before the book. So could you maybe explain, I know it's hard because you wrote 300-something pages about it, but could you maybe explain to those people here who haven't read your book yet what it's about? What it's about, maybe?
The Caoineadh tradition.
Yeah, no, the Caoineadh, the special Caoineadh from Eibhlín Dubh.
Yes, so the Caoineadh tradition within Irish literature is a kind of oral literature that was practiced traditionally by women over the dead, and it's something that occurs in other cultures globally as well, that it's women who are invited to lament over the dead. And in Ireland, traditionally, the way that that would have happened was through this particular kind of poetry, which represents to me a really high level of intellectual achievement to succeed in composing a poem like this, because it occurs to very distinctive and important set of metrical rules. There are certain linguistic motifs. It's really intricate. It's like knitting a jumper or a sweater to a really intricate pattern. There's so much skill involved. But as I say, it would have been particularly practiced by women over the dead traditionally. Eibhlín Dubh Ní Chonaills would have witnessed her mother reciting these kinds of poems in her childhood, and quite likely she would have witnessed other women as well reciting these kinds of poems over the dead. And when her husband Airt was murdered, his horse found its way back to Eibhlín Dubh, and she saw him. Would you like a glass of water? Are you okay? Okay, I've got some here if you want. So when his horse came back, she saw the horse ride into the yard, and she knew something was terribly wrong because she could see that there was blood on the saddle. And so she hopped onto the horse's back, and the horse carried her to where Airt was lying, dead. And she was so moved and so distraught that her howl gradually took the form of a Caoineadh, this extremely long, very precise and beautiful articulation of grief. And so what is said is that she composed and recited this poem over his body when she fell to her knees and scooped up handfuls of his blood and drank them, and then had this experience of speaking the poem, that she would have spoken it several other times over the days that followed. And those who witnessed the recitation of this Caoineadh, I suppose we can presume that they could see how important a work of literature it was, or at the very least that they were deeply moved by this Caoineadh as well. And what often happened with the Caoineadh, we know from extraordinary scholarship that's been done by people like Maeve Nick and Angela Burke and many others, that with this form of oral literature, other women would have heard the poem recited and then would have recited it themselves, and other women would learn it by heart, and then they would recite it, and still more people would learn it by heart. And so what I was very struck by as I was writing A Ghost in the Throat was how much we had women to thank for the fact that this poem still exists, still was the fact that it was carried through women's bodies and women's imaginations, being learned by heart, spoken, learned by heart, spoken, and being treasured by people. And that it was because of this chain of women remembering and speaking it for so long that it was eventually transcribed and published and then translated many times by many different people and poets. Kind of a rite of passage in Ireland to translate Caoineadh Airth at this stage. But that it was carried to us seemed so astonishing to me, and almost miraculous, really. And when I came to this poem, that was one of the things that really provoked me and made me want to know more. It really made me want to know more about the woman who had composed this extraordinary poem.
And the whole poem, it's a very long poem, I think 36 verses something, is in the back of the book in the English version, and in the German version there is the Gaelic original and then the English translation by Doireann Ní Ghríofa and the German translation by Friebe. And I think this is the moment now we have to hear a few phrases from that poem, maybe first in Gaelic and then in your English translation.
Sure.
Doireann, this would be great.
I'm so grateful to Cornelius and to Jens for the wonderful translation.
Yeah.
It's been extraordinary.
And it must have been really, really hard and difficult.
Yeah. So I'm going to read just a couple of verses from Queen Airt Lyra, and it's so important to me to bring Eibhlín Dubh's voice into this room, and I'm so grateful to all of you for being here to hear it, because I mean it's almost sacred, you know, for me to bring her in and her voice after so many years. Mugrá go daingan tú. Lád a bhacathú I ceantaí an bharige, thug mo húil ar a ghuit, thug mo chrí tanamh ghuit, dé líos charad leat I bhad ó bhalla leat. O my beloved, steadfast and true, the day I first saw you by the market's thatched roof, how my eye took a shine to you, how my heart took delight in you. I fled my companions with you to soar far from home with you. Is dumsa nor vatrach, church porlús ó yalagum, rúmana om rakagum, bácús ó yaragagum, brící ó giapagum, róstar varavgum, martha lagagum, colle glúv lachangum, go díoch an teidirthe, nu harish dá datnach lam. And never did I regret it, for you set a parlour gleaming for me, bedchambers brightened for me, an oven warming for me, plump loaves rising for me, meats twisting on spits for me, beef butchered for me, and duck down slumbers for me until midday milking or beyond if I'd want. I could keep going, but
I love it so much.
thank you.
That was so amazing. So before Benita reads the second part, let's talk about translation. So is it right, you grew up bilingual?
Yes.
And you translate your Gaelic poems into English, and of course you translated the Caoineadh itself for your book. How difficult was that, especially compared to translating your own work?
Very, very different for me, because when I'm translating my own poems from the Irish language into English, I feel like, well, these are my poems, so I can be a little mischievous. I can change things here and there, and I tend to regard it as composing a new poem in English that corresponds with the Irish version rather than a word-for-word translation. When I'm translating someone else's work, I'm much more conscientious and careful and methodical, and I deliberate so deeply over carrying or attempting to carry the essence of their voice into English. And for me, in that process, fidelity seems most important to me, particularly when I was so, when I had such a deep affinity for Eibhlín Dubh and for her voice, and such a deep admiration for her, it felt even more important to me that I would honour her. And it felt like a gesture of honouring more than anything else, I think, and an effort to come closer to her, because the level of attention that we bring at a human level to a text when we're translating it is so different from the attention that we bring to it as a reader. As a reader, we're allowing ourselves to be transported in it. As a translator, it's like opening the bonnet of a car and looking at all the pieces, taking them all out, and then trying to put the engine together
and make
again.
It go.
Yeah, make it go. Oh my gosh, yeah. But it was difficult to translate it. I mean, I'm very glad that I tried. I learned so much from it, but I would never be the kind of writer or poet who would be able to claim that I did it utterly successfully, because I'm such an admirer of Eileen Dubh Ní Chonaill's original poem that is just the purest and clearest, and the rest of us are just trying and failing and trying and failing.
But sometimes I thought your work researching a woman's remarkable life is also a kind of a translation, like maybe kind of a translation from a past woman's life into our time. So do you know what I want to say? How important is the connection between history and the present for your work?
For my work, I feel that's what drives me. Yeah, very much that sense of connection with the past, and how the past is always like hiding behind the curtains of any room that we're in. It's always here with us, just because we can't necessarily see people of the past, that they're still with us in some way, you know, and that they make themselves felt. And that's something that's hugely important to me in my work, that sense of honouring people's lives as best, as well as I can, because it's kind of a fool's errand in a way, you know, but it is, I love books and art and films that do that somehow evoke that sense for us, or that illusion maybe of the past and of our relationship with people, you know, real people, empathy and admiration and that sense of connection more than anything. So when I come to writing my own books, that's what happens on the page, you know.
So now we want to dive deeper into history, and Benita will read the next passage.
Die Zwillinge beschlossen, von Caoineadh einen Ausflug in die Stadt zu machen. Dort ließ Nelly den Blick über den Markt schweifen. Schön und extravagant gekleidet, wie er war, lief Art O'Leary nicht einfach durch ihr Blickfeld. Er schritt. Als sie ihm hinterherblickte, wuchs in ihr eine Strophe heran, die ihr zukünftiges Ich dichten würde. Die erste Strophe eines Gedichts, das Nelly jetzt noch nicht denken konnte. Ein Text, der sie zum Tod dieses Fremden tragen würde. Ein Text, der sie alle überleben würde. Dies ist der Moment, mit dem das Caoineadh beginnt. Als ich dich einst sah, beim Reetdach auf dem Markt, mein Aug hell erleuchtet mein, Herz voller Freude, floh mit dir die meinen so weit von daheim. Diese Zeilen spielen sich gleichzeitig in zwei Landschaften ab, sowohl in einem geschäftigen Straßenbild als auch in einem weiblichen Körper. Die Dichterin stellt sich selbst als die Aktive dar. Sie ist es, die Art sieht. Sie ist es, die den körperlichen Stich des Begehrens und der Liebe spürt. Und sie ist es, die beschließt, mit ihm zu fliehen. Wie Nellys hatte auch Arts Familie Mittel und Wege gefunden, unter dem brutalen Regime der Strafgesetze zu Wohlstand zu gelangen, da sein Vater sich eine Anstellung bei einer wohlhabenden Grundbesitzerfamilie gesichert hatte. Als Gutsverwalter für die Minhairs arbeitete er als Mittelsmann, der die Pacht von dem örtlichen Bauern eintrieb und sie bei einem Chef ablieferte. Die Tätigkeit ermöglichte es ihm, eine Farm in Raleigh zu pachten, einen kurzen Ritt von Macroom entfernt. Auch wenn es englisch klingen mag, ist Raleigh in diesem Fall eine Anglisierung von Ra-Liach, das Ringwort von Liach. Für einen ehrgeizigen Mann wie Airt, der zur jüngeren Generation einer ehemals adligen gälischen Familie gehörte, bedeutete die Realität der Strafgesetze, dass ihm nicht nur der Zugang zur Schulbildung verwehrt war, sondern auch das öffentliche Auftreten als der Gentleman, als der er sich fühlte. Sein Vater legte derweil genügend Geld beiseite, um Airt, als er volljährig war, eine Reise nach Österreich auf dem See- und Landweg zu bezahlen und ihm eine Stelle in der österreich-ungarischen Armee zu verschaffen, die dem Befehl von Kaiserin Maria-Theresia unterstand. In seinem Regiment, den ungarischen Husaren, stieg Airt schnell zum Hauptmann auf und machte sich einen Namen, sodass die Kaiserin ihm ein eigenes Pferd, einen dekorativen Bronzeadler und 2 große ornamentale Soldatenstatuen schenkte. Die Skulpturen reisten in Airts Gefolge nach Hause quer durch Europa in Planwagen auf dem Seeweg und auf der Straße. Der Adler wurde schließlich an der Wand des Hofes von Raleigh House angebracht, als Geschenk der Mutter eines kleinen Mädchens, das später einmal eine französische Königin werden sollte und noch später von der Guillotine knien. Airt war furchtlos oder tollkühn oder beides. Wann immer er auf Heimaturlaub zu Besuch war, machte er viel Wirbel um sich selbst, indem er zum Beispiel öffentlich ein Schwert zur Schau trug oder auf einem rollenden Fass die Main Street hinunterrannte. Auf diese Weise machte er zugleich viel Wirbel um die Gesetze, die erlassen worden waren, um seinesgleichen zu unterdrücken. Für eine Jugendliche, die den Anblick von Männern gewohnt war, deren Verhalten eher von ängstlicher Unterwürfigkeit geprägt war, muss sein Auftreten geradezu fantastisch glamourös gewirkt haben. Nellys Blick klebte an seinem Körper und dessen Bewegungen. Nelly stellte fest, dass sie begehrte, ihm vorgestellt zu werden. Nelly stellte fest, dass sie begehrte. Von allen Dingen, die ich in meinem eigenen kleinen Leben begehrte, war mir mittlerweile die Entdeckung des Lebens einer anderen Frau das Wichtigste geworden. Sogar wichtiger als Schlaf. Mein Hauptgegner in diesem Kampf war ich selbst. Ich war müde, nein, ich war erschöpft. Und doch überwog meine Entschlossenheit die Bedürfnisse und das Begehren meines Körpers. Wie belanglos jedes neue kleine Detail, auf das ich stieß, einen Außenstehenden auch erscheinen mochte, für mich war es von großem Wert. Ich sammelte jede noch so spärliche Information auf und trug sie mit mir durchs Leben, ließ sie meine Fantasie anregen, während ich Hausarbeiten erledigte, meine Kinder badete oder im Stau stand. Ich staubsaugte und schrubbte und las Geschichten vor und stopfte Bettdecken in Bezüge, während sie sich in meinem Innern immer realer anzufühlen begann. Jedes Mal, wenn ich dachte, ich sei zu müde zum Weitermachen, hatte ich das Gefühl, dass ich Eibhlín Dubh im Stich ließ. Ich wurde wütend auf mich selbst. In meiner Verzweiflung fing ich an, spät abends Kaffee zu trinken, mir die heiße Tinte in den Rachen zu kippen, das Gesicht verzerrt wie nach einem Tequila. Ich hatte mein Handy immer neben mir am Bett liegen, während die anderen schliefen, um Notizen, Bilder oder neue Listen auf meinen Bildschirm zu tippen. In dieser Dunkelheit dachte ich über Begehren und Macht nach. Ich sah Marys Ehering, Nellys Lächeln oder Airts Schatten, wie er über die Mauern in Macroon huschte, die ich kannte. Jede Nacht kämpfte ich gegen meinen Körper an, so lange, bis er sich wehrte und mir mitten im Satz die Augen zufielen, meine Finger sich öffneten und mein Handy zu Boden fiel. Jede Nacht wiederholte ich dieses Ritual, lag so lange wach, wie mein Körper es zuließ und lauschte aufmerksam, ob sie vielleicht klopfen würde. Es gab ein Klopfen. Ich konnte es hören, schwach und matt, aber es stieg aus meiner eigenen Brust auf. Wir können mit großer Sicherheit annehmen, dass sich das neue Paar in der gemeinsam verbrachten Zeit oft angelächelt haben wird. Vielleicht können wir auch annehmen, dass es gelegentlich zu einer heimlichen Berührung oder einem Kuss kam, ohne dass wir jedoch wüssten, wie solche Momente herbeigeführt, überwacht oder unterbunden wurden. Ich frage mich, ob auch Mary zu den Verabredungen mitgeschleppt wurde. Die arme Mary, wachsam oder gelangweilt in ihrer Rolle als Anstandsdame. Die arme Mary, schon wieder schwanger und müde, voller Sehnsucht, sich zu Hause zu fühlen. Es dauerte eine Weile, bis ich den genauen Standort von Caoineadh Haus ausfindig gemacht habe. Ich studiere mit zusammengekniffenen Augen alte Landkarten und versuche, die gezackten Begrenzungen alter Wege und Felder mit modernen Satellitenbildern abzugleichen. Die Landschaft sieht so anders aus, als ich dort ankomme, dass ich zunächst verwirrt bin und in langsamen Runden das Gebiet umfahre, das sie gekannt haben muss. Irgendwann steige ich aus und stehe am Rande eines Feldweges und versuche, durch Brombeergesträuch zu sehen, aber der Blick dringt nicht durchs Dickicht. Ich werde ungeduldig und spüre das innere Jucken, das mir sagt, dass mir die Zeit davonläuft und meine Tochter zu Hause bald nach Milch verlangen wird. Aus einer Laune heraus bitte ich Mary, mich zu ihrem Haus zu führen. Ich sage mir, dass ein solch schräger Ansatz zur Seltsamkeit meines Auftrags passt, bin durch den Klang meiner Stimme dann aber doch peinlich berührt. Skeptiker mögen es als Zufall abtun, dass kurz darauf ein Auto neben mir hält, aus dem mich ein Bauer fragt, ob ich mich verfahren hätte. Er wisse vom alten Haus der Baldwins, sagte er, und führte mich zu der feuchten Wiese, auf der sich einst Marys Räume befanden. Sehen Sie, sagte er, nichts. Er macht kehrt, während ich noch oben auf einem metallenen Weidegatter sitzen, ins Leere blicke, in dem einst ein Gedicht schöner Räume stand. Jede Stanza eine eigene, sorgfältige Komposition. Die Wandschirme, Porträts und Bücher, die blauen Vasen und bestickten Decken, die Vorhänge und Anrichten, die Briefe, die Kämme und Mäntel, die Löffel und Spiegel und Scheuertücher und Kohleneimer und Tagebücher und Nachttöpfe. Jetzt nichts. Eine weitere große Auslöschung. Eine weitere ganz gewöhnliche Tilgung eines Frauenlebens. Der Bauer hat recht. Ich schaue auf nichts. Ich schaue zugleich auf alles.
So just to get you prepared, I have one question and then we maybe open the questions for the audience. So, very good. It seemed, Doireann, like we were diving deep with you into the life of Eibhlín Dubh, really, really deep. So how did you protect yourself from getting lost, or was it maybe directly the opposite, trying to be dissolved for a while?
I don't think I built very strong boundaries, and I think that's part of what I tried to be open about in the book. I tried to bring the reader along with me in my efforts, and my failures, and the points where I physically feel like I'm incapable of continuing, and when I read the book now, or when I have the pleasure of listening to Benita read it so beautifully, I'm just, I don't know how I did it. I really don't. And I'm glad that I was truthful about how difficult it was, and how in some ways it went beyond those boundaries. But the urgency and the devotion that I felt to Airt Dubh Ní Chonaills, I think merited that level of sacrifice, and sometimes things that are important to attempt are difficult, and I'm really glad that I did it, because coming to know Airt Dubh Ní Chonaills and to know her work as well as I did in the research and in the writing for this book has changed me completely, has changed my whole life. It has brought me here to be with all of you this evening, and it just continues to change things for me. So it was probably one of the hardest things I ever did in my life, but it was also one of the most important, and Airt Dubh Ní Chonaills has just been a spectacular force in my life, and I owe her so much.
Most important for us now. Thank you. So I have a look, maybe hand signs. We are very looking forward your questions over there. We have ist ein bisschen Gegenlicht, but I try to, genau. Sonst einfach aufstehen.
Aufstehen? Okay.
Ja, gern.
First of all, thank you very much for coming tonight. Your book means a lot to me, so I'm very excited. I'm a translator, and I was very curious to see that the book was translated by two men into German, and this is not at all a criticism. I think it's a good translation.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it's true that you need to have a similar identity to the person whose work you're translating to be able to do a good job translating it. However, you do emphasize several times in the text that it is a female text. Mm-hmm. And so I was just wondering if you were consulted about this decision, or if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I find it so interesting. Yeah, this is something that people have discussed with me several times, and I suppose all I can say is that I think it's a really good translation. I think that the art and the labour of translation is really important work, and that I wouldn't like any translator to be ignored on the basis of their gender or how they define themselves or choose to define their gender. I would like any translator being considered for work to be considered on the basis of the work rather than their gender. And I think it's a great translation. I think it's really interesting. I am delighted. I don't know if that answers it. Yeah, that's my feeling.
She looks happy. She seems like we answered. Okay.
Thank you for your question.
We have time for, over here in the middle. Yeah, get up is a very good idea. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, so I'm really...
She's prepared.
Yeah, I am. I plan on writing my bachelor thesis on the book, so I have to be prepared.
Whoa.
I was wondering about the connection between your translation and the story itself. So did you first translate the Keane and then thought there's a story somewhere there? Or were you wondering when you wrote the story, all the translations I do have are not sufficient? That's it.
That's it. Firstly, like if you're writing about the book, we can chat later and I can give you my details and we can arrange a longer conversation. That is no problem, because I don't think I can answer such an interesting question in a succinct manner. Really, when I first came to Queen Airt, the Líre, it was through the poem and my tatty old photocopy of it, which is described in this, and my beginnings of scribbles in the margin. That kind of marginalia is very fruitful territory for me. That's often when I first know that there's a depth there that I want to start to excavate. If I look at something and I see, I've scribbled all over this, that's a sign that there's something to it. So I think to a certain extent the curiosity and the beginnings of rough efforts at translation occurred kind of side by side, because the more I was returning and reading the poem, the more I was scribbling like ideas of different ways or different kind of examples of English to put on it, and in tandem with that, my curiosity about her life was growing. So I was going and seeking out other people's translations, and I'm such a nerd about that kind of thing. So like putting them side by side and looking at the different choices that people made. There's been some spectacular, very subjective opinion, there's been some spectacular translations of this poem, and then there's been some very shoddy work, which I give thumbs down to, but I never have and never will name names. So I think, to answer your question as briefly as I can, kind of all in a big unscientific mishmash, like I say in the book, but all at once, and then very intensely the quest of trying to find out more. But we can talk more later. I'm happy to give you some time. Yeah, no problem.
See you.
Also a happy face. So you have a question over here, and maybe you get up. Yeah.
I feel it's kind of weird sitting here because I'm the translator of the book. And so, hi. Thank you. So delighted to meet you in person now.
Cornelius,
and
Reiber in the house.
whenever, because I've listened to all the podcasts discussing this and the weirdness about like how would a man be the translator of this text. And I'm so delighted too, so I'm happy that you said you're delighted.
I'm glad I gave the right answer.
No, and just whoever has questions about that can chat with me too, like how this comes about. And
yeah, thank you. I look forward to having a chat with you later, and thank you for being here.
Yes, I would be happy to.
Yeah, thank you. I could have gotten in trouble there. Oh my God!
Yeah. And this is all on live stream also, so yes. don't forget. So we have one last question maybe. Yeah, over here in front of me directly, third row. Yeah.
Have other poems by Airbhlín Dubh survived, or is this the only one that we have?
That's a great question. Yeah, this is the only one that we know of. Yeah, but a lot of works of oral literature by women in Ireland, including a lot of this lament tradition, these quinta, were forgotten. We only have a tiny fraction. So I suppose it's possible that there were other works that she composed, and that we're oblivious to. They were just lost to history.
And my second question, what sources could you find giving information about her, aside from the poem itself?
What sources? Was that it? I couldn't fully hear with the microphone. Luckily for me, Airbhlín Dubh Ní Chonaills was from a celebrated, very famous Irish family, and I mean she kind of married into nobility as well. So there has been a lot of research done on her family because her nephew is, I mean, a huge figure in the history of Ireland, Daniel O'Connell. So the amount of research that's been done around the family was substantial, and I profited from being able to study that and to study the work of other scholars. For example, there was a book, a very old book that had been published that was just the correspondence between the male relatives, and it was contemporaneous with when Eibhlín Dubh was alive, letters between her male relatives about all kinds of things, including like some small hints of the lives of women that were there. So there were, I was very lucky, there were quite a lot of sources to draw on. Yeah, and at the back of the book there's a reading list for anyone who wants to go to those sources. It's because, as I said, so many Irish poets have translated it over the years as well. Like, people have written about the poem, and there's a lot of scholarship to draw on as well. Yeah, so it's very, very well written about. And this is like another little drop in the ocean, this book. Yeah.
So I can invite you all to stay here for the next talk, and it's important. Is this my that Darren has a short break between that, and there will be another talk with Diana Fink and Saskia Vogel directly hereafter. And don't forget the reception, thanks to the Irish Embassy.
I think Michelle is saying that it's a different location, is it?
It's a different location. It's a different location. At 9 p.m. at the Bonneman Bar, no? Okay, yeah. And the talk is directly hereafter. So thank you so much for coming.
Sorry.
This was really confusing now. So we have to stop this. Neither nor. So we have a lot of chances to talk to Darren about her great book this evening. So stay with us and have a good night.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Benita Bailey.
Yeah.